am one of India's midnight children, born around the time of independence. All through the 1950s, there was an air of nation building in the country. And I was quite excited with the idea of nation building. By the time I had graduated from school, I was clear that that's what I wanted to do. During my time at IIT, around 65 to 67, there was a major drought in Bihar and eastern UP. And Lal Bahadur Shastri, the Prime Minister, gave an inspiring call to the nation to tighten our belts and miss a meal to share the suffering of the poor. It was around that time that I decided that I did not want to follow a normal engineer's career, and I would dedicate my life to nation building, particularly in the rural areas. At about this time, a number of Indian students abroad had started an organization called Front for Rapid Economic Advancement of India. They were looking for counterparts in India, and they got in touch with me. We were inspired by the similarity of our ideas, and we decided to set up the first chapter of Front for Rapid Economic Advancement in India at the IIT Bombay campus. Initially, it started out by involving students during the summertime to take part in activities of rural development or working in the slums in urban areas. And gradually it expanded into a movement under the inspired leadership of one of our senior friends, Dunu Roy of IIT Bombay, class of 67. I must confess that when we started FRIA, we had no idea of what development really meant. But as we gathered experience, as the young students went out and confronted the issues of poverty, we began to learn the lessons of development. And I still remember Dunu articulating it very well in one sentence, that development is a necessary process of confrontation with vested interests. Shortly after we launched FRIA at IIT Bombay, I got a fellowship to go abroad, and I handed over the reins of FRIA to Dunu and went abroad. Came back in early 1981. Unfortunately, at that stage, FRIA had a lot of internal problems, and I had to abandon the idea of running FRIA and do something new. The next stage was the establishment of People's Science Institute. We were fairly clear about our goal at PSI, and that was to empower the common people, particularly the poor, to take responsibility for their lives, for their development, and to rise above the poverty line in a sustainable and a socially just manner. When we started People's Science Institute, we were quite lucky that there had been several very, very important and successful experiments of poverty eradication in India, particularly in the 70s. India is primarily a country of agriculturists. There are farmers and there are people who labor on the farms. But our agricultural productivity is very, very poor when we compare it with what is possible and what other nations have achieved. We were also seeing stagnation of the Green Revolution idea. Productivities in the Green Revolution belt were either stagnant or had begun to fall. And therefore, we needed a different approach to enhancing agricultural productivity. One idea was the recognition that agriculture is not simply what happens on the fields, but it involves good forestry, good water management, good land management, and innovative approaches to new problems that emerge. And therefore, we tried to follow the ideas of watershed development, where you treat a region, a catchment of a river or a stream, from the ridge line to the valley. What you do at the top affects what happens down in the valleys where most of the fields are. We involved a lot of small organizations, and the first time I remember we began with a program around 2000 with about 15 organizations working in small watersheds of 500 hectares. And in these watersheds, the basic approach was that we bring the people to come and share a common dream. The dream being to make the land more productive, or as I put it very often in the villages, कि धरती पर हमको हरियाली चाहिए और चेहरे पर हमको खुशहाली चाहिए. It was in this task that we aligned ourselves with a number of small organizations in Uttarakhand and Himachal to implement the watershed plans. Barren land has been converted into highly productive land. Today, we can see in these watersheds that the so-called wastelands, which barely produced a ton of biomass per hectare, producing anywhere about 20 tons of biomass per hectare. What we are seeing are streams that were seasonal becoming perennial streams. We are seeing wells being full of water all year round in the valleys.
मैं अनिल शर्मा हूँ. पिछले 20 सालों से गिनी घाट में साथी के साथ काम कर रहा हूँ. स्वयंसेवक बनने से पहले मैं एक कॉलेज में पढ़ाता था, तो कॉलेज में कुछ स्वयंसेवक मेरे सूत्रा संस्था के स्वयंसेवक मेरे को मिले. उन स्वयंसेवकों की प्रेरणा से मेरे को लगा कि मेरे को ये जॉब छोड़ देनी चाहिए, नौकरी छोड़ देनी चाहिए और गांव में जाके काम करना चाहिए. फिर हम लोगों ने, साथी ने, पीएसआई ने, वो स्थानीय लोगों ने जलगम परियोजना को गिनी घाट क्षेत्र में कार्यान्वित किया. तो इसके लिए जो है वो जलगम परियोजना जो हमारी सफल हुई है, उसके लिए मैं डॉक्टर चोपड़ा साहब का बहुत बहुत आभारी हूँ कि उन्होंने समय अनुरूप हमें वो हमारा ज्ञान भी बढ़ाया है, अपना स्टाफ भी उपलब्ध कराया है. तो इस कारण से हम एक अच्छा वाटरशेड यहाँ खड़ा कर पाए हैं.
खुद अपने आप ट्रेन से खोदी, उसमें घास लगाया और इन्होंने बताया हमको, ग्राम पोस्ट दिया, हमने डैम बनाया, कुएं बनाए, सब कुछ किया. हमने खुद काम किया महिलाओं ने. और आगे न इसमें हमने नकदी फसलें उगाई. पहले यहाँ कुछ नहीं होता था, इधर उधर लगाते थे फसलें. और हमारे पास अब बहुत घास है. एक दो परिवार ऐसा है हमारा जो उसमें हम घास बेचते हैं.
वर्तमान में मैं साथी में एससीजी के साथ ही कार्य कर रही हूँ. मैं पीएसआई के थ्रू ही एक प्रोजेक्ट यहाँ पे चला हुआ है, डीएमपी सूखा न्यूनीकरण प्रोग्राम, उसमें कार्य कर रही हूँ. और अभी उसका प्लानिंग फेज चला हुआ है. मैं 4 गांव हमारे पास हैं, उन गाँव की प्लानिंग करके पीएसआई को दे रही हूँ.
पहले हमारे पानी नहीं होता था, पानी की दिक्कत थी, तो इन्होंने हमारे लिए वो भी प्रोजेक्ट चलाया. तो कुएं बनाए, बावड़ियाँ बनाई, तो हमको गर्मी की मौसम में भी पानी, सब्जी उगाते हैं हम अपने लिए, जो बच जाती है उसको बेचते भी हैं.
I must confess that I do not use anything out of the courses that I learnt at IIT. But there were a lot of lessons beyond the courses at IIT. We were told, get your fundas right. Your concepts have to be clear. And that is a very important lesson. The second lesson that I always remember is be clear why you are doing whatever you are doing. Your objectives have to be clear. And I keep hammering this with whoever I work with. But tell me first, why do you want to do this? The third thing that I remember from IIT was that you have to have a method. To go from A to B, you need to know your pathway. And for that, what we learned was to work methodically. You require systems. You require a systems approach to implementing activities. And one reason why at People Science Institute we are able to scale up our activities from one village to a district, to 2 districts, 4 districts, is because we can bring in a systems approach to implementing our work. You know, the task of nation building is not easy. Very often people say to me, यार इतने लोग इतना काम कर रहे हैं पर फिर भी इतनी गरीबी है हमारे देश में. The way I look at that statement is there is so much to do, and I would encourage every IITian to think hard. How many engineers do we need? How many scientists do we need? And how many people do we need to get rid of poverty? And poverty is in the villages. Gandhiji was absolutely right when he said that India lives in its villages. Even today we are in our villages. India is one of the slowest urbanizing nations in the world, and we must address ourselves to the problems where they are. Otherwise, we'll end up creating little islands of prosperity in our towns and cities, and we'll be surrounded by this vast ocean of poverty. I think that IITians can contribute enormously, but poverty eradication is not a part-time job. It is not something that you can just volunteer a few hours a week. So particularly to the younger IITians, I would say, take a leap into the dark. Don't worry about the safety net. The safety net is always there. Once an IITian, you can be assured of the support of other IITians. So take a leap into the dark. Don't be scared and risk it. Don't be scared. Take a risk. The rewards are enormous.